Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Bhupendra. Let me make you co-host. And also Mansi.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes, please, Bhupendra.
Sir, you have made Ashish as a co-host.
Oh, okay. Maybe my mistake. 1 second. Okay. Now this should be okay.
Thank you, sir.
So I think Mr. Hari has joined. Hari, can you hear
Hi,
us?
Harsh.
Hi.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Great to see you.
Likewise.
Thank you for agreeing to do this session for us. And both your topics are immensely interesting. And I hope that many students will pick up your book and really go through your insights in details. Of course, we will get a preview of that today in our discussion. Right. So how was your working day today like? Working remotely, I guess.
Yes, working remotely.
Yes.
For the last 9 months.
No travel at
How's
all.
it? No travel, absolutely. And
Okay.
how's life on campus? So I'm assuming you're on campus.
No, I don't live on campus. I
Yeah.
live in some distance away
Okay.
in Gurgaon.
Oh, Gurgaon,
So,
I see. Yeah.
so I commute from here, and
Mhm.
we used to have offline class, face to face.
Mhm. Mhm.
But after this pandemic started, all classes
Mhm.
have been suspended, and
Mhm.
all these sessions have happened online.
Online.
Yeah. So unless
Uh,
for very, very significant meetings, which is very rare, I would say
yeah.
maybe once a month or like that.
And Zoom
Otherwise,
meetings are anyway so effective.
they are actually,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
I mean, in terms of people, it's a different kind of a gathering, right? I mean,
Yes, correct.
you can do follow up, you can bring in so much resources,
Yes.
so it's much more
And
effective.
what's the biggest shortcoming of this online education? What have you experienced? What doesn't work online, which is very effective face to face?
Right. I would say I miss looking at the expressions of
Mm.
students, because that I always like to do, uh,
Mm-hmm.
whether they're looking enlightened or
Yeah.
looking clueless. It could be either. And then accordingly, maybe
Mhm.
change the mood of
Mhm.
conversation.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, we can't get them all to have their video unmuted, and right, we cannot,
Yeah.
because these sessions are
Correct.
big. So that's one thing
Yes.
I miss. Even
Yeah.
though class, let's say in a regular class, if people are quieter, I can always incite them. I can go up to them and
Yeah.
talk on a face to
Yeah.
face. I often do that
Correct.
also. Yeah.
Correct.
So those are some of the
And what do
elements.
you teach?
So I teach entrepreneurship courses in IIT
Yeah.
mostly, and
Yeah.
also strategy courses.
Okay.
I used to teach a course called International
Yeah.
Competitiveness, right?
Yes.
So my training has been in strategy, basically, my PhD in strategy. And then I gradually moved into the entrepreneurship side.
Got it.
So I was in the neighborhood of a very thriving ecosystem of New York, right? So you
Mm-hmm.
can't help but come across startups and all that.
Mm-hmm.
So I realized that a lot of the learning that is there in strategy, it becomes so much alive, in an entrepreneurial setup. So it was a natural shift, and since then I
Understood.
haven't been able to, sign that off.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, people are gradually trickling in, and
Yeah. Now we can wait for a few minutes if you think it will
yes,
help people to join. I'm
absolutely,
perfectly.
absolutely. Actually, today is also a Saturday,
Yeah. Correct.
so people may be in a little relatively relaxed mode. It's the
Correct.
psychology of Saturday a
Yes, of
week.
course.
Right. So you live which part of the country?
I know Bangalore.
Bangalore. Okay,
And
you're in Bangalore.
yeah.
How has it been in Bangalore? Because we don't get a real picture in terms of generally the life. Otherwise, it's such a vibrant place. But has it
Hmm.
anyway changed over this period?
Traffic on the roads is less. People don't go out as much as before. I think it's like any other city in India.
Okay,
It's no different. Hmm.
right. Yeah, because well, for me, Bangalore is on my mind since 80s.
Okay.
So that memory, of course, I cannot write off. But
Yeah.
the new Bangalore, it was all about startups. That's
Yes.
what I
Yes.
saw and got exposed to.
Yeah.
Yeah. So sure, you are living at a very happening place, right?
Yeah. Bangalore is pretty much, in some ways, the epicenter of whatever is happening in the startup world.
Right. Right. And Gurgaon is picking up.
Yes,
Um,
very much.
yeah. It's and IIT Delhi, by all from all angles, can become the relevant institution
Yeah.
to energize this ecosystem.
Correct.
So that's the attempt,
Yeah.
that we should try to do more stuff to make it a relevant place.
Yeah.
Right. So why don't we have about 40 plus students? I know this number will swell up. And I would request, Mansi, you there? Can you hear me?
She's on mute.
Yes, sir.
Okay, Mansi. So you would be introducing Mr. Hari, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So we can get started now and we'll get into the topic. Yes. Thank you.
All right, sir. So good evening, everybody, and welcome to today's session of MSL 305 and 306. I'd like to introduce today's guest speaker, Mr. Hari. Hari sir wears many hats. He is an author. He is also an angel investor, an advisor to VCs, a mentor at startup accelerators, a columnist, and also a sounding board to founders and startups. Sir has co-authored many books with 3 more in the pipeline. Some of his books are From Pony to Unicorn, Sailing Through a Storm, Saying No to Jugaad, Cutting the Gordon Knot, Cut the Crap in Jargon, and Back to Basics in Management. Sir has also been a part of the management team at multiple startups and scale-ups and has helped shape 4 successful exits in different industries, including an IPO on NASDAQ. Sir is extremely passionate about solving problems and building organizations for scaling through clear and uncluttered thinking and relentless execution. Thank you so much, sir, for taking out the time to speak to our class today. Sir, would you be needing to share your screen for your presentation?
No, I won't need that.
All right, sir. Thank you, sir.
Great. So over to you, Hari.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, for inviting me to talk to all of you. I think it's such a privilege. So maybe I will just dive into the topic straight away. So I have, my entire career can be broken up into 2 large chunks. The first 14 years I spent at Tata Steel and the next 18 years with a string of high growth startups. And at Tata Steel, I worked mostly as a mechanical engineer. And maybe after about 11 years, I switched to the human capital function. And that was more by accident because Tata Steel was going through an existential crisis post 1991 after, the economy was liberalized and, CIS countries were dumping steel at prices that were at below our costs. And therefore, we had to do something, very dramatic to be able to adjust and cope and compete in this world. And we asked McKinsey to come and help us a little bit with this, think through this problem. And I was part of the core team from Tata Steel that worked with McKinsey on this project. And human capital, I realized, can be an exciting place, especially, in fast-paced organizations. At some point, I felt that Tata Steel was too big and a bit too bureaucratic for my liking. I was more of a rule breaker and wanting to do things at speed. So I wanted to explore the world outside, the world of startups, the world of fast-paced, high-growth organizations. And that was how I joined this company called Daksh. And moving from Tata Steel to Daksh in some ways was like going from an oil tanker to a fighter jet. That was the extent of difference between the 2 organizations, I would say. And Daksh was acquired by IBM. I worked for Virtusa, which we listed on NASDAQ, worked for Amba Research, which was in the KPO, knowledge process outsourcing space, where we did investment research. That was acquired by Moody's. And then with Taxi for Sure, that was acquired and merged with Ola. And finally, last 5.5 years with Big Basket. So, my colleague Sanjeev Agarwal, actually, he was my manager at Daksh. He was the founder, CEO of Daksh. And Sanjeev and I have, been very closely associated ever since the Daksh days. For the last 18 years, we've been, professionally associated in many ways. Sanjeev and Nandan Nilekani are founders of a growth stage VC fund called Fundamentum, and I happen to be a strategic advisor there. So Sanjeev and I go a long way back, and at some point we realized that both of us bring a deep understanding of how to scale organizations, how to build companies. And that's how we decided to come together and write this book called Pony to Unicorn. This is a book really about how to build a company. It's largely about startups, but I would say that several mature companies, larger companies also can learn a lot from this book. TV Narendran, who is the CEO of Tata Steel, has also commented, that there were a lot of leadership lessons for even the mature companies in this book. So maybe I will just take you through some of the lessons in this book and some of our experiences in scaling and organization. I am assuming that, since you're all studying entrepreneurship, startups and the startup ecosystem would be deeply relevant for all of you and would be of deep interest to all of you. And actually, all lessons and insights in this book, I would say are easy to understand once they are discovered. The point is to discover them without paying a high price. So I think no lesson in this world is difficult to really understand, maybe excepting quantum mechanics or relativity or some such, cutting field edge science and technology. But most other things in life, if you assemble a bunch of intelligent people into a white room and give them a whiteboard, I think they can pretty much solve any problem. The only point is that, how do you discover these lessons without, making mistakes that could jeopardize your organization or your startup's journey? So we thought, it's helpful for us to be able to put together all lessons in one place, or a large number of lessons in one place, which will give, the next generation of entrepreneurs, an opportunity to read the book and figure out the possible mistakes that they could make, some of the learnings that they could use while scaling their startups. So that entirely was the motive for writing this book, which is to help the next generation of entrepreneurs build sustainable businesses without the wheels coming off. That really was the motive for writing this book. Broadly, when we thought of this book, we figured out how do we, put together all lessons in one place. So we've taken one chapter, which is the second chapter, and said, let's identify everything that matters, all the parameters which are important for scaling. How do you build a large company? How do you take an idea and build a large company? What are the ingredients? What are the necessary, pieces of the recipe that need to come together? And we identified 9 of them. I'll just quickly walk you through some of them. So what I'll do is I will try and talk a little bit and give you a bit of an overview, but it'll be really great, if you can ask me questions. So, through a question answer mechanism, I think we can get deeper insights than me, providing you guys with a monologue. So quickly, the 9 parameters are, the 9 things are the 2 M's. We just give some kind of an acronym. It's not really an acronym because it's not a word that you can pronounce. So there are 2 M's, there are 2 F's, there are 2 C's, there are 2 S's, and there is an H. So the 2 M's are, if you want to build a really big company, you need to be part of a mega trend and you need to participate in a large enough market. These are the 2 M's. So mega trend, which means that, there is something which is taking shape. So for example, urban transport was a problem at some point of time where, you could not get a cab on demand. And most cities in India, forget India, most cities in the world, excepting a few like Mumbai and New York, you could get a cab on demand. Even in a city like Mumbai, it was not easy to get a cab on demand, excepting in, some very central locations. And even there, sometimes you had to wait for 30 minutes, 40 minutes to get a cab, and that too, the quality of the cab wouldn't be good, and you weren't sure at all. So this was in some ways a problem. And once Uber started, using technology to fix this in San Francisco, a mega trend began taking shape. Sometimes, entrepreneurs can even trigger a mega trend. So whether a mega trend already exists and you're participating in that mega trend, or you are instrumental in creating the mega trend, does not matter. Sometimes it's actually very difficult to distinguish between whether you created a mega trend and whether an entrepreneur created a mega trend or actually participated in one. And there are several other mega trends. So one mega trend, big one that I can see taking shape, is the next 400 million consumers in India. I think, a large number of startups, especially e-commerce companies, have very successfully addressed the needs of about 60 to 70 million rich, well-off consumers in India, in cities like Gurgaon, Bangalore, Delhi, Mumbai, the top 10 cities in India. So the next 400 million consumers are waiting. And I would say in the last 10 years, a lot of things on the technology front have quietly taken shape. Aadhaar rails have been laid out, payment platforms are working very well. And India's payment, infrastructure is possibly the best in the world. You can transfer money fastest and in the most inexpensive way in India as compared to any other country. The Citizens Identity Program of Aadhaar is possibly the best social transformation project ever undertaken in the world. So I think India has done some good work in the last 10 years, and many founders, entrepreneurs, and the ecosystem at large, I think, can ride on this infrastructure and create wonderful businesses. And the needs of the next 400 million consumers are very different from the needs of the first or the top 70 million consumers. The price performance, combination is very different for the 400 million. They would want, much lower price for the same performance, or they would want a much higher performance if they had to pay the same price. So those customers are far more demanding than the top end of the pyramid customers. So building products for them that are relevant is important. And I can see this trend taking shape. The biggest indicator is the way Reliance Jio raised $20 to $25 billion of money in less than 3 to 4 months' time. And the day the pandemic hit, I think Mukesh Ambani figured out that Reliance was a highly leveraged company like Future. Future actually ended up collapsing because they were unable to even pay interest because revenues actually came off. So Mukesh Ambani figured out that, it's a risky proposition having such a high leverage. And therefore, how do you de-risk it by taking the debt off the balance sheet and bringing in equity? So very quickly, he brought on $20-25 billion of equity. And, JioMart has taken shape. JioMart is therefore going to address, 400 million consumers. Tatas have said they will create a super app. They are working very hard on creating the super app and creating the infrastructure, the supply chains beneath these super apps. Otherwise, the super app is no use unless it is underneath the super app. There is this, supply chain. So I can see a mega trend taking shape. And there are several mega trends. So it's important for you, to build $1 billion company, to identify a mega trend. It should be about $10 billion in terms of size, the market size. If you capture 5% of this $10 billion opportunity, you can potentially create a unicorn. And if you fulfill both these conditions, which is there is a mega trend and the market opportunity is big, invariably it is bound to attract the attention of the big gorillas. And these big gorillas can be Indian conglomerates or they could be multinational companies. For example, the big market in India for urban transport quickly attracted Uber. The e-commerce market in India, potential attracted an Amazon. So these are the big gorillas who are bound to come in. And if you are a founder, you need to be able to fight these gorillas. They come with deep pockets, deep pockets, and an ability to execute and success in a different geography. So they have the playbook written pretty much. So if you have to fight these gorillas, then you need to be able to do something which is different. And the remaining, 7 parameters are what we will talk about. So the 2 M's are external parameters, and the remaining 7 are the things that a founder or the founders need to bring to the table to be able to create the business. The next are the 2 S's, I would call them, making the right strategic choices. A strategic choice is something, if you get it right, then you can, I would say, mask a lot of other weaknesses. And it's important to make those right strategic choices. Sometimes making a right strategic choices is not just about intellect. It is about character. I will talk to you a little bit about that. And first, let me differentiate for you 3 terms. One is intellect, the other is uncluttered or clear thinking, and the third is character. Intellect is what everybody on this call has, undoubtedly. Otherwise, you wouldn't even be studying at IIT Delhi. Intellect is the ability to understand complex things. Intellect is the ability to make interconnections. It's the ability to spot patterns. Uncluttered thinking, on the other hand, isn't being able to realize which interconnections are important and which interconnections are not important, which patterns are important, which patterns are not important. So that is uncluttered thinking. It's an ability to focus on the things that matter, being smart enough to figure out all the interconnections, but also smarter to figure out which interconnections matter and giving that undivided attention. The next is character. Character is really about the difference between knowing and doing, right? Raghuram Rajan knew that the housing market was a big bubble, right? Many other smart people like him knew that it was a bubble, but none of them could do anything to, to either prevent the bubble or to accelerate the collapse of the bubble so that corrective actions, processes could be initiated. But somebody like a John Paulson, who was a hedge fund manager, he betted his farm and house against the bubble by shorting all the securities that had the underlying stock as, housing mortgages. And by doing so, in many ways, he accelerated the collapse. But if he had failed, he would have lost everything. But he had the guts to bet against the stock market against the housing market because he knew it was inherently a bubble. That is character, which is the difference between knowing and doing. All of us know many things. For example, Buddha taught us the formula for happiness, and every religion teaches us formula for happiness. But many of us are not happy because we are unable to bridge the gap between knowing and doing. It needs character to be happy. It needs character to make the right investment decisions. Now, coming to strategic choices, it needs character to make those right strategic choices. I'll tell you why. So, for example, when Big Basket, was setting up shop, the question that Big Basket asked was, why do customers shop with us? And the answer was they wanted to avoid a visit to the store. And therefore, if that was the reason, if they ordered 20 items and we delivered only 18 or even 19 and did not deliver that 1 or 2, and if we forced that customer to visit the store for those 1 or 2 items, they might buy the remaining 18, 19 also from the store. If we forced a customer to visit the store for vegetables and ice creams and did only the dry grocery, then they might buy the dry grocery also from the physical store. So we figured out, you need to be able to give them everything that they want. And therefore, we built the supply chains for fruits and vegetables and chilled and frozen foods, which is a wicked supply chain, extremely difficult. Nobody has built it here, actually. We also realized that if we are to get 100% fill rate, give everything a customer orders, then we need to own the inventory, control the inventory. Otherwise, we can't do it. If we just station a bunch of people standing outside a Big Bazaar store and pick up items from Big Bazaar store to deliver orders to customers, we will have no clue what's in the store and what we can deliver. So we'll accept an order for 20 items, but deliver only 15. That would completely break customer experience. So we were sure about this. Now, have heard of Tiger Global and SoftBank, right? They are the big daddies of this, investing stock of the startup world. In fact, Tiger enjoyed such a reputation that if they decided to fund one startup, every other startup would be scared to death, because that startup which was funded by Tiger would pump in so much money to acquire customers that they would kill all competitors. Now, Tiger came to speak to Big Basket, and Tiger that time was led by, Leaf Excel was a partner. Kalyan Krishnamurthy, the current founder of, current CEO at Flipkart, Walmart, was also a partner at Tiger. Within 15 minutes, they pretty much told us, what, your model sucks because it's an asset heavy model. And only the asset light models are the ones that are going to scale in the future, because it's very easy to scale asset light models where you don't hold inventory. If you want to expand it in a new city, just hire a bunch of delivery boys, give them smartphones, apps, and an ability to pick up stuff from other stores and deliver to customers. And, what did the Big Basket could have been, scared that the Pope and the church of the investing world are telling us that the sun goes round the earth. Do we believe that the sun goes round the earth, or stick to our belief that the earth goes round the sun? That's what Galileo did. So I think it needs courage to be able to stick to your belief when the big daddies of the investing world are telling you you're wrong. Now, there is always a fear. Maybe we are really wrong. Maybe these guys have seen the world. Maybe they know better. So we made the right strategic choice of an asset heavy model. And that's the only model that survives today. Everybody who went down the path of asset light model died along the way. And the only other startup which also made a choice of asset light model quickly pivoted and moved into an asset heavy model, and that's Grofers. So it was proven that this strategic choice worked for us. So I think, you have to make those right strategic choices, and making those right strategic choices, as I clarified to you, is not always about intellect. It's largely about courage as well. The second S is strategically executing. So strategic execution. So I'll just give you an example here to illustrate this. I don't know if you have heard of, Safi Bakal, who's written this book called Loon Shots. In his book, Loon Shots, he talks of two types of innovations, the P-type innovation and the S-type innovation. The P-type innovation is about a great product. It could be a jet engine, it could be a Polaroid camera, it could be a Apple phone. But an S-type innovation is about getting process, training, technology, audit, all these mechanisms to dovetail together in such a seamless way that you can deliver an outstanding customer experience over millions of transactions month after month, year after year. And somebody who's seeing this from the outside cannot even figure out how this is happening. So for example, as I told you, getting 100% fill rate. If you order 27 items, we will deliver 27 items. And the delivery boy will come to you, will follow a particular process. There is a technology in place, there is a process in place. The delivery boy will bring a cutter because all the items have been sealed in crates of different colors, because you have hazardous items, non-hazardous items, and you have chiller boxes to hold the chilled and frozen and fruits and vegetables. Now the cutter has to be in the pouch of this individual. The cutter has to be used to open up the boxes, crates. And then there is an invoice. He checks with the invoice. He will figure out from you whether all items delivered or not delivered. If there's a shortage, immediately it has to be sorted out. Now, how do you ensure that you create an outstanding customer experience over millions of transactions like this? And this can happen only if you bring everything together. So for example, in the beginning, we found that the cutter was never carried by the delivery boy. Now the delivery boy also ended up, taking out the stuff from the chiller boxes and putting them into the other crates so that he could reduce the load which he had to carry. But that ended up, not giving a great experience because the ice creams were not really frozen. Part of it was melting. So it was not great. So how about if we do? We introduce IoT devices into the chiller boxes and we could figure out if anything was tampered. We introduce an audit process to check whether everything was working well, random checks. So bringing training, process, technology, audits in such a seamless way that you can deliver outstanding customer experience day after day, month after month. The next are the two Fs, which is founder ambition and foundation. Founder ambition is very critical. It's very obvious that, nothing can be accomplished without founder ambition. Founder ambition is extremely critical for success, especially when you're fighting these big gorillas. I don't know it was who said this, but I think if I'm not mistaken, it was Prahalad who said that, your ambition, needs to go beyond your resources. And that's what entrepreneurs are all about, where their ambition and imagination is more than the resources at hand. Most of us always look at a resource constraint, but founders look beyond that. They should be looking beyond that. So for example, when Uber came into India, how did Ola fight? How did the Ola founders fight? They demonstrated terrific founder ambition. They also allied with another gorilla from the investing world, which is SoftBank. So beautifully tied up with another gorilla from the investing world, and also demonstrated founder ambition in fighting with Uber on the ground day after day, fighting them man to man on the streets. So that's what they did. Take Big Basket, right? Amazon was in the grocery play. And for a long time, Amazon could not figure this out because the Big Basket founders demonstrated founder ambition. Founder ambition in each case, ultimately played out in different ways. In some cases, it could be about a lot of hustle and personally doing things. In some other case, founder ambition came across as creating the right organization structures and hiring the right kind of people and empowering them. So Big Basket was able to beautifully fight with Flipkart. Flipkart actually ended up giving up on grocery. They found it too difficult to execute. Binny Bansal at that point of time, who was the CEO of Flipkart, made a comment that, I can't get my wife to buy grocery from Flipkart because, she's so addicted and hooked to Big Basket. But Flipkart have come back again. Amazon has come back again. They are great companies and they will put up a fight. But even smaller startups like Big Basket will have to fight them. And sometimes, you need to ally with, other gorillas to be able to fight. Like I give you the example of how Ola allied with SoftBank. make my trip allied with C-Trip, because otherwise Go Ibibo had tied up with Naspers. Naspers was one of the world's biggest investors. And with Naspers to back Go Ibibo, there was no way Make My Trip could have fought Go Ibibo. But then Make My Trip beautifully allied with C-Trip, which was another gorilla. And eventually Make My Trip ended up acquiring Go Ibibo. So I talked about founder ambition. Foundation is very critical, because without foundation, nothing will happen, nothing good happens. So you need to build your foundation. If you don't build your foundation, you could still have rapid growth for a short while. But after some time, all the dirty things begin popping up because you've not built the foundation. And therefore, the growth is bound to come off after some time. Growth will not be sustainable. And I can give you numerous examples of cases where growth could not be sustained because foundation was not built. Take the case of Rocket Internet in India. All the Rocket Internet companies did not build their foundation, whether it was Jabong or whether it was Food Panda. They had a problem with ethics, they had a problem with governance, they had a problem with everything. So nothing on the foundation was right. In fact, many of them, shut. Jabong, which was valued at $1.2 billion at its peak, was sold off in a fire sale to Flipkart at less than $70 million. And there are several such examples, Food Panda included. And Rocket Internet in India shut lock, stock, and barrel because, they thought that all you had to do to build a great company was take a model from the West that has succeeded, hire a bunch of people from McKinsey, and you can build a great company. That's not the way you build a great company. So foundation was completely missing. Snapdeal, classic example, the net promoter scores or NPS scores were all low, which means that consumers or customers were inherently unhappy. Their assortment was poor. Their supply chains were bad. And they did not, were not able to deliver what was promised. So they created very poor customer experience. As a result, they began going from good to mediocre. At a peak of $6.5 billion, they spent 200 plus crores on an advertising campaign to rebrand themselves, but they could not survive. And they are currently valued at $1 billion. They made fundamental changes to run a sustainable business. For whatever reasons, they did not sell to Flipkart. So they are now there and trying to build a more sustainable business. So they did not focus entirely on building the foundation. So we talked of 2 M's, we talked of 2 F's, 2 S's. And what else did I tell you? The 2 C's. The 2 C's are culture and customer centricity. Culture is extremely important. So most people, unfortunately don't really understand culture. And it's somewhat surprising because even a lot of professionals, even after 20 years of working in companies, don't understand culture better than they understood it when they started their career. And over the 20-year period, their understanding of strategy, supply chain, marketing, finance, accounting, everything keeps improving with time. But their understanding of culture remains where it was when they started their career. And that is so sad because culture is such a tangible thing and most people don't really get it. One easy way, I've always used to explain culture to people is using game theory. Game theory is an extremely powerful tool to be able to explain various social behaviors, including competitive dynamics. And similarly, it can be used to explain culture. It can be used to explain why people in a company behave in a particular way and why people in a different company behave in a different way. Why people in Boston, stop when at an intersection when the traffic signal turns red in the middle of the night when no one is there, whereas in a city like Bangalore, everyone breaks the traffic signals even in the middle of the day. So you wonder why the behavior is so different. It's about culture. It's about what is, what has been created. The same thing is true for companies as well. So I think it's very important to create the right kind of culture. And culture is an extremely complex subject. It's not at all black and white. It's very easy, to say that there's a great culture, there's a poor culture. No, there is no good and bad culture. There are some cultures which are patently and blatantly toxic. If you forget those, most of the cultures, there's really nothing much to choose because culture is like a personality for an organization. Like each of us are different personalities. Some of us are very numbers savvy, numbers oriented. Some of us have empathy. Some of us, know how to build relationships and how to sell well. Some of us are problem solvers, some of us are not problem solvers, but we know how to, coach and get the best out of mediocre people and make them good. So each of us has different strengths, and this is a personality. Similarly, companies also have personalities. It's very difficult to change an individual personality. It's difficult to change organization cultures. But organizations need to know their culture just as individuals need to know who they are. Because if you don't know who you are, you can't make your strengths work for you. Similarly, if companies don't know who they are, they can't make their culture work for them. Very important to understand that. We've talked about this extensively. We've addressed all possible questions. How do you change culture? Is it even possible? Is there a top-down culture? Is it bottom-up culture? How does culture translate to business outcomes? And how does it translate to, for example, a talent strategy? We've talked about all this. A lot of wrong things have been misunderstood for culture. People think, free wine on, tap, beer available in the office, a very cool culture, ability to bring your dog to work, bean bags, that constitutes culture. That doesn't constitute culture at all. Nor do espoused values like customer centricity, which are, written and posters created and, put on, meeting group. They don't constitute culture either. Culture is the invisible stuff. You need to peer under the surface to figure out what's the culture. So that's the C of culture. The next is customer centricity. Customer centricity is all about being focused on what problems the customer is facing. Sometimes what happens is when founders create a product, they don't really look at the customer's problems. They don't look at it from that perspective. I give the example of Big Basket, which is we ask the question, why does the customer shop with us? And we answer that question very thoughtfully. I think you need to answer that question very thoughtfully. And for answering that question thoughtfully, you need to frame the right questions. So for example, if you go and ask your mom that I have an idea, you think this idea is great, your mom is unlikely to tell you it's a bad idea, right? She'll tell you it's a good idea. So you need to frame the right questions and ask the right kind of people. If you frame vague questions, people will give you vague answers, and that will not help you sharpen the proposition for your customers. So it's important to demonstrate customer centricity. So if you demonstrate customer centricity, growth will happen. Net promoter score will be high. Word of mouth will be high. People will recommend your products. Your products can go viral. You don't need to spend on marketing and advertising. Word of mouth will be sufficient. There'll be crazy word of mouth. So customer centricity is always important. And what happens is that sometimes as companies become big and as organizations become hierarchical, people who matter tend to be cut off from customers and tend to be cut off from employees who are at the front lines working very closely with customers. As a result, they no longer remain customer centric. They get to listen to what they want to hear. People tell them what they want to hear. So this company, after becoming big, sometimes loses touch with reality and therefore can get disrupted by a smart startup which is close to customers. So we talked of customer centricity and culture. So we finished 8. The last one I would like to talk to you about is the human capital practices, possibly the most complex because a lot of lessons in this area are often learned through experience. You can never learn people issues, human capital issues by reading a textbook. Never, never. So it comes with experience. Some people learn it quickly through experience. Some people take a long time to learn. And most founders, because they tend to be young, they understand technology, product, marketing stuff very well. And customer, they understand well because the entire idea itself, which they thought about, is really about using technology, understanding customers. So those aspects they understand well, but they don't understand the human capital issues well. So human capital is very nuanced. There's a large number of issues when it comes to human capital. It can be about, at what point of time do you bring in key hires? Do you bring in people laterally? How many lateral hires do you bring? How do you integrate or assimilate the laterals into the current organization, create a mutually respectful environment between the lateral hires and the internal rock stars? How do you figure out whether you need to hire below a leader or do you need to replace the leader and hire above that person? So there are many, nuances in human capital. You need to understand that. So broadly, we've talked about many of these. We've explained each of these through a lot of examples. Although we've not necessarily structured, the chapters around these, 9 habits. We've also talked about, the 3 biggest startup ecosystems in the world. and three biggest economies in terms of the PPP, framework, which is the US, China, and India. We've talked of the scaling, story in the US, scaling story in China, what happened in China, what happened in India. And interestingly, what China and India started off in 1978 at pretty much the same per capita GDP, same total GDP, $150 billion at approximately at that point of time. And China went down the path of implementing reforms. They implemented a one-child policy. I'm not commenting on good or bad. They went down that path. And India went down that path in 1977, 78 with the coalition government, experimenting with the coalition government. Janata Party came, Morarji Desai was the prime minister. And things did not really move because the decisions were stuck at several places. And India ended up electing Indira Gandhi back again. It took 1991 when India got bankrupt for India to launch some reforms. So the turning point in India was really launch of reforms in 1991. And things improved, but India's journey has always been about 2 steps forward, 1 step backward, and for short periods of time, 2 steps forward and maybe even 3 steps backward. And but fortunately, as I've told you, in the last 10 years, a lot of things have happened. A lot of technology infrastructure, best in class in the world, has gotten built. And China's success has also motivated many VCs, hedge funds to come to India and believe in the macro India thesis. And for a change, Indian entrepreneurs were not solving the problems of the West. All the Indian IT services companies like Wipro, Infosys ended up using the labor arbitrage between the West and India to solve problems for the West. But starting possibly with Flipkart in 2008, Indian entrepreneurs began solving Indian problems. Big VC funds came into India. The ecosystem matured. Early stage VC funds, late stage, growth stage, all types of VC funds began setting up shop in India. Local funds, got created. Many entrepreneurs turned into VCs. The ecosystem became pretty mature. It became cool to become an entrepreneur. Entrepreneurship is taught in colleges like IIT Delhi, unthinkable in my time. So it's just so amazing. And startups get day one slots in great campuses like yours. And, people like Sachin Bansal, Binny Bansal inspired hundreds, if not thousands of other young people to take up entrepreneurship. You have incubators, accelerators in campuses. People, do a startup even while studying. So I think the startup ecosystem in India has taken shape. Only time will tell us, how it will unfold. But I have a very strong positive belief in the next 10 to 15 years, a good number of businesses in India will get created. And those businesses will solve problems for the 400 million Indians. And I believe Middle India's tryst with destiny has come, and it is now. So that broadly is what I have to say. And we've talked about several things in the book in fair amount of detail, but I think I would like to open it up for questions more than me talking anymore. Mansi, will you be able to help me with some questions?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so questions could trickle in, but maybe I have a few questions along the way.
Yeah.
One thing is your last statement. You see the environment for entrepreneurship building, and you're right. During your time at IIT or my time at IIT, which might have been a decade earlier, we did not have anything related to entrepreneurship for sure, even business related courses, right? There was no management department, no.
Correct.
Now IIT Madras and IIT Delhi, both of them have a management department, right?
I think even IIT Kharagpur.
Even IIT Kharagpur.
Yeah.
Right. And so my question is that, yes, now there are students who are interested in entrepreneurship. But how much does this environment matter in your reading? The support system you mentioned, incubators and accelerators and these programs like this, and the broad environment. Let's say IIT Delhi is surrounded by a certain kind of ecosystem, right? Entrepreneurial ecosystem. How much does that matter? How does it contribute to entrepreneurs in your assessment?
In my opinion, it is very helpful. So, for example, if there is a single or founder or a set of founders who are trying to create a company, many times they don't have a basic idea about how to build a product, how to raise money, how to do frugal marketing. Instead of being all by themselves and learning these lessons by making mistakes, if they're part of an accelerator, then there is a lot that can be, accelerated. I'm part of Techstars, I'm part of, Silicon Road, Numa. These accelerators are extremely powerful because there are mentors on these accelerators. The accelerators take a small stake in the startup, very carefully identify, and put them on a fast track of learning, where they make all kinds of resources available, including introductions to potential customers, including introductions to product specialists who can help these founders build a product well, who can help take a product to market quickly using an MVP model. They can help the founders, figure out how to hire, what kind of people to hire. So I think the ecosystem of incubators, startups, where a critical mass of people come together, that I think peer learning and the support that's available is very powerful.
I totally agree with you. In fact, I saw an environment. I don't know if you have had a chance to visit T-Hub in Hyderabad, right? It's one of the largest incubator now.
I have heard about T-Hub, yes.
Right, and they have
Correct,
250 incubators. I did some programs there, some accelerator programs, I was amazed that that environment can do so much, to them. That the vibrancy,
correct.
Everyone is talking a language and everyone is engaged with their startup idea, and so much of exchange that's happening. So I definitely agree. So we have some questions. Mansi, if you can help us.
Yes, I can read the questions. So I can think Kshitij Malik, right? His question is, what's the difference in the models between big asset, light asset systems you talked about? So it wasn't in the Flipkart context, it's in the big basket context, but I think it's relevant everywhere. Yeah. So I talked of an asset light and an asset heavy model. Asset light is really about a marketplace, which is that you as a company don't hold the inventory. So what you do is when a customer orders something, you have tied up with a few stores and you go walk into the store, pick those items and deliver those items to the customer. So what you do is you have stationed a bunch of delivery boys, for example, outside of a big bazaar. And if a customer orders 10 items, and those could be, atta dal, it could be, edible oil, it could be anything. You walk inside the store, pick those items, delivery boy walks inside, picks those items, pays at the counter, and uses the motorbike or scooter to go and deliver. That's an asset light model. Asset heavy model means the company itself, startup itself, has its own warehouse, and exactly like a big bazaar has its warehouse and stores, this company also procures directly from distributors and manufacturers and holds the inventory. And when customers place order from that inventory, they supply to consumers. That's the difference.
Okay, sir. Yeah, got it. Thank you.
Second question, I think, is from Shreya. You talked about foundation of a founder. So could you please elaborate on significance? See, foundation is not of a founder. I talked about two F's. One is foundation and the second F was founder ambition. So foundation is about building, it's like a building, if you understand a building well, if the taller you want to create a building, build a structure which is taller, the foundation needs to be deeper and needs to be strong. And the same is true for large trees as well, right? Bigger the tree, the deeper the roots. So for building foundation is important. And foundation actually comprises of many things. So for example, if you are running on Excel spreadsheets in the very beginning of your startup stage, you cannot run on Excel spreadsheets after a while because it will kill you. You need to invest in the right automation technology that will help you solve problems better, deal with data better. So for example, that can be building a foundation. Creating a right policy that prevents and addresses sexual harassment issues in the company, both prevention and redressal, is building the foundation. Because if you don't do this and something happens, your company will come apart completely. So it is about building the foundation. Building the foundation is also about creating the right kind of customer experience even if it slows down the growth a little bit, or even if it slows down the launch a little bit, focusing on exactly what the customer wants and creating that product market fit. It is foundation. So foundation can be many things. So that's largely about foundation. Did I answer your question, Shreya?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Then let's me come to the next one. Raghav, can you delve a little into how game theory can help us understanding the culture of an organization? Okay, so let me give you a real life example. So take a company in which there are a bunch of people who have a day job to do. It means they all have work to do. They are all in some role or the other. Now, one fine morning, the company decides that they need to create a cross-functional initiative. I'm assuming you understand what a cross-functional initiative means. It means it's a project which cuts across multiple functions. So the company draws one person from each of these 8 functions, let's say, and brings them together and tell them, you guys are a team of 8. You have your day jobs to do, continue to do them. But this is a very important company-wide project. You need to work on it and solve this particular problem. Now, let's say you are part of that team. Now you have a choice to make, which is that, will I work hard on this project or will I take a free ride? Should I just focus my efforts on my day job, achieve my goals, achieve my boss's goals, keep him happy and get a good increase at the end of the year, salary increase? Or should I just compromise it a little bit and work very hard on the project? Now that's a choice that you can make. So for example, if you decide to take a free ride on this project and all the 7 others work very hard, the project will anyway succeed and you will be rewarded as part of a winning team. And since you took a free ride, you were working on your day job well, your day job goes well, you get a salary increase also. So you get both the benefits, right? Now, therefore, the choice that you would tend to make is take a free ride. Now let's assume the 7 others also take a free ride. You also have now taken a free ride. So the project fails, nothing happens, nobody gets rewarded, nobody gets punished. But let's say you work hard on the project and the project will still fail because 7 others have chosen to, take a free ride. You don't get the benefit of that project. And your boss tells you what an idiot you were to work so hard on the project by compromising on our jobs. So here also, if others don't work hard, you will still be taking a free ride. So irrespective of whether the 7 others work hard on the project or don't work hard on the project, your default choice is to take a free ride. So just look at it, right? A rational person will always choose to take a free ride. Now let's just change the conditions a little bit. And that condition is, if you choose to take a free ride and the project succeeds because 7 others have worked hard on the project, you are not going to get rewarded for that project. The company identifies you as a black sheep, not fit for leadership roles, unethical individual. Your boss tells you you are not no good because you have not contributed as a citizen of the company, and therefore you get earmarked as somebody whose career will never take off. If that is the attitude that the company takes, what will you do? You will do a good job on the project irrespective of what the 7 others do. So that's game theory for you, which is that the kind of rules that an organization sets will drive individual behavior. In the second type of a company, which recognizes people who work hard, irrespective of the success, and those who take a free ride and differentiates between the two, there will be no free riders. So culture is really about the behaviors that leaders in a company reward and recognize. So that's how you can use game theory to explain the other problem I told you about traffic, why in Boston people follow traffic rules, in Bangalore and Mumbai or Gurgaon people may not follow traffic rules.
Brilliant insight there, Hari. And it reminded me actually of a story, ancient story, Indian story of the king who wanted to make this pond made of milk, and how it ended up becoming a pond of water. Right?
Yes.
Right. And also I was reminded of the lead management, some of these techniques that Japanese corporations use. And one thing that may help, perhaps, if there is a dialogue environment, let's say if there is a problem which is identified, and even though it might have originated from, let's say, a particular employee's point, but that problem gets discussed as if owned by everyone, and then the problem is solved in a systemic way. Do you think that could be a way to address? I mean, one thing is to have organizational policies. The other is to create some of those softer mechanisms of people not necessarily, pinning down a person, but really creating this exchange.
Absolutely,
What are your thoughts?
undoubtedly.
Yeah.
Undoubtedly agree with you. Can be done, absolutely.
Okay. Do you have other questions?
Yeah, I can see one more question, which is, what was the strength of Big Basket that helped them stay with their model where the founders validating with the customers? This is Utsav. So I would say that Big Basket continued to validate with customers. It was both an intuition, it was past experience, where they had already validated with customers, and it was continuous validation with customers. So it was very clear to us, the company, that fill rate, which is that being able to supply everything that a customer orders in a predictable way, is critical to success. If you can't deliver everything, if they order 25 and you deliver 23, you are dead. This business will never take off. We were very clear on that.
Yeah.
So that was.
There was one question by Mayank Modi as well. Hari, if you can see that.
Yeah,
Should
I'm
I read
seeing
it?
that.
Yeah,
I can
please.
read it. Can you suggest a proper timeline of how a student can directly start his or her startup in a correct way immediately after a graduation, provided he or she? So there is a book called, by name, An Entrepreneur's Soul Book by Swati Jena. Mayank, I would suggest you read that book, because entrepreneurship is not everyone's cup of tea. In fact, the title of the book is An Entrepreneur's Soul Book, and entrepreneurship is not for everyone. So read that book. After reading that book, if you feel like doing something of your own, do it. For example, I have been in the ecosystem for very long. I have been with startups for 18 years, but I have chosen not to be an entrepreneur because I think I've had the, realization, self-awareness that entrepreneurship in some ways is not for me. I love working with startups. I have worked very closely with entrepreneurs, VCs, but I've never taken entrepreneurship on my own because I felt some things, are not for me. That kind of risk is not for me. So I think you read that book, you'll get a good sense of whether entrepreneurship is for you or not. And if you feel strongly about it, even after you read it, then you can take it up anytime. I don't think there is, right, perfect time for entrepreneurship.
And what do you think, Hari, about being entrepreneurial, which is working in a company? And
so I have been very entrepreneurial. So I've been very entrepreneurial. And many great companies have succeeded because they have had entrepreneurs. So HUL, for example, Hindustan Unilever, a classic example of how they produce so many CEOs. Many such companies, have created these. Amazon, I think, is a great company which has encouraged entrepreneurs, where people have been given the freedom, the budget to pursue their own dreams as if they were pursuing their own startups. So I think for people who don't want to take up entrepreneurship, entrepreneurship is the next best thing. And I've done that precisely.
And one related question, quick, so do you think taking entrepreneurship courses, could that make students entrepreneurial in case if they wish to, if they have low appetite for risk, low risk appetite, and then working in corporations? Do you think taking these courses, sessions, could it help build at least the mindset for entrepreneurial?
Very much. I think these courses on entrepreneurship, I think, are very helpful to you. And I don't know whether they will necessarily make you a founder, but they will try and induce certain behaviors. And those behaviors are very effective even as an entrepreneur.
Well said. Thank you. So Shashank has a question, and Raghav. Shashank, you want to ask the question from Mr. Hari?
Sir, I will ask him last.
Yes,
Yes, Shashank, please go ahead.
Hello, sir. So my question is about one of the survey which my friends conducted. He's from same class, but he's not present today. So we conducted a survey where we asked people, would they prefer to have the traditional food? It's not about normal idli and dosa. It's like normal food that they might have in their homes. So we asked people, would they will pay for this? So they say, yeah, we will pay around 200 to $250 for for one food at a time. and like NPS, it suggests that NPS will be good from that survey. So what's your take on that? And what would be like ideal prototype for that particular idea if you would like to like try it in the market?
Very difficult to respond to very specific ideas like this. This is Shashank, is it? Yeah.
Yes, sir.
It's very difficult to respond to ideas like this off the cuff, because you can never poke fun at any idea eventually, because any idea can take off and you never know what will work. But all I would tell you is that read this book by I think it was Bob Fitzpatrick. The name of the book is called The Mom Test. The Mom Test is a very powerful book which tells you what kind of questions you must ask of potential customers to figure out whether your idea is good or not. Sometimes I told you, like if you ask your mother whether the idea is good, she will tell you it's good. If you ask a customer, do you want any food besides idli, dosa, they will tell you, yeah, of course I want all foods besides idli and dosa. But the way to frame the questions is something you need to frame that in a smart way. You need to figure out how you will ever make money out of this. You need to figure out what is the market size for this. So you need to be able to answer a lot of those questions, think through a lot of those questions. Because otherwise, you can come up with any idea, and it's very difficult to say what will work. So I told you there's so many, the 9 parameters you need to build, but what your question is really is an idea good or not. And for that, I think you should read How to Frame Questions to figure out whether an idea has inherent demand or not. So for example, if you ask
the name of book, can you please repeat?
I think it's Bob Fitzpatrick. The name of the book is Mom Test, MOM, The Mom Test.
Okay.
Read that book. That book is, a lot of entrepreneurs respect what is written in the book about how to figure out whether an idea is worth doing as a startup or not. And you should meet a lot of people who can punch holes. You should not just meet people who will say it's a good idea. Ask people who will tell you it's a third-rate idea and ask them why, and listen to them very carefully. Because if you ask a lot of people casually what is in their interest to tell you it's a bad idea or to give you feedback, they will just casually, if you ask me casually, if I have no stakes, I'll tell you I think it's a good idea, you can try it out, and then walk out of that meeting. So it's very important for you to find out those real answers by talking to people who will punch holes.
Makes sense. Thank you so much, sir.
And Raghav Ajitsaria, he thanks you, Hari, for a very relevant and relatable example.
Yes, I saw that. Yes.
Yes. So Raghav, which example you're talking about? Which one appealed to you? Can you unmute and just mention that? If you're there. Raghav Ajitsaria, are you there? You'll have to unmute in case if you want to comment. Which example you found relevant and relatable? Okay, just if you heard the message, you can go ahead. Okay.
Sir, I think he replied on the game theory example.
Game theory
example. I also thought.
Excellent. I thought so too. Right. Excellent. Okay, then Mayank Modi has another question. Mayank, you want to, should we read this?
Yeah, Mayank, why don't you ask the question?
Yeah. Mayank, you're there? Unmute, please, and ask your question. Yeah.
Yes, sir. I want to ask, am I audible?
Yes, very clear.
Sir, I want to ask an unrelated question, sir. As an author, do you read fictional books based on fiction?
Do you read? What's the question? Do I read?
Yeah.
Yes, I read fiction also.
Okay.
I read fiction as well. So, for example, these are 2 books of fiction which I read recently. Chitra Banerjee, Divakaruni,
Yeah.
Palace of Illusions.
Yeah.
This is the book on Sita by Volga, Liberation of Sita.
Okay. So actually, I'm also a big reader kind of a thing, so I just wanted to know.
Fiction, I think, liberates your soul.
Yeah.
I think while business books, in my younger days, I was much more of literature oriented. My English teacher loved me a great deal. I was the favorite. But as I grew bigger, the other side of my brain, which is my engineering brain and business brain, took over. But I kept reading. But I think literature is what really liberates my soul and gives me peace. And you know what? In times of stress, in times of a crisis, it is poetry and literature which gives you that inner strength. So if you have that habit, please stick to that.
Yes, sir. That's the exact thing I read.
Wonderful, Mayank. That is so good. Shreya has another question. Shreya, you want to ask it yourself?
Sure, sir. So, sir, I wanted to understand as to what kind of human capital practices one should adopt initially, and what should be the strategy and choices to be made there.
Wow. That's a difficult question to answer, frankly, Shreya, because it is a very nuanced question. You should read my book, and that chapter runs into some 30, 40 pages. So we talk about different aspects of human capital there. It is not very easy to have a list and say these 4 or 5 things are the right things, you do them. These 4 or 5 things are the wrong things, you should do them. Because every recommendation or every suggestion is always contextual. Something is good or bad depending on the context. There can never be any universal prescriptions. So it's very difficult to say these are the 5 things you should do. Broadly, if you ask me, Arthur Rubinstein was asked what's the universal formula for success. His answer was there is no universal formula for success, but if I had to prescribe one, it would be an unconditional acceptance of life and all that it brings. If you also ask me for some universal good practices, I would say respect for people, transparency in the way you deal with things, trust, creating an atmosphere of trust, mutual collaboration, supporting one another. All those are universally good things to have. That broadly is what I can say. But otherwise, this question and the topic is extremely nuanced. We've dealt with that in detail.
Excellent. Thank you for your insightfulness there, because I know it does not come across, in many organizations, and that's what, if they are able to build, then the human capital, at least in my exposure, really takes off. So I think those are very, very solid points. Thank you.
So if you had to mention 5 books that one student should read in his college life, so what would be them?
So I'm not prepared for this question, but let me make an attempt. So please bear with me. Right. So there are books from many backgrounds I have read and liked. So for example, a book that I recently liked is Where Will Man Take Us?, which is about the kind of man that technology is making. Have you heard of Yuval Noah Harari? His book is Sapiens, one of the most...
Yes, sir.
Have you also heard of Ray Kurzweil, The Singularity is Near?
Yes, sir.
So these are very, thought-provoking books which are changing the way man is thinking. But these are too difficult to understand books. I found Atul Jalan's book, Where Will Man Take Us?, to be absolutely fascinating. That was one of the few books in the last many years that I could read cover to cover without getting up from my chair. I could read that. So that's a book I will strongly recommend, which is Where Will Man Take Us? Another book which is slightly difficult, but I would recommend is this book by Daniel Kahneman, which is Thinking Fast and Slow.
Right.
I would recommend that. So in terms of entrepreneurship, one more book that I may recommend when it comes to entrepreneurship is The Hard Thing About Hard Things, Ben Horowitz. I would recommend that. And frankly, I learn a lot of lessons from non-management books. Although I write about startups, I read more from the other side of things. So for example, Shackleton's Way is to me a masterpiece on leadership. You must have heard of Shackleton, right? A British Antarctic explorer. That's a beautiful book. I mean, it is lasted for so many decades. Powerful book on how he even recruited people into his team. There are lessons in recruitment. There are lessons in how to build a team. There is lessons in how to, identify, motivate people to bring out their best. That kind of, so I think that book is something I would strongly recommend. So these are things that offhand I can think of. I also read fiction. I read books on history. History is fascinating. Guns, Germs and Steel is a beautiful book by Jared Diamond that I was very impressed with. Guns, Germs and Steel. So I think I've given you 5 names.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing your list. Of course, as I was listening to you, the kind of experience, I was reminded of 2-3 books which have stayed with me. One is, of course, the classic Les Miserables, Victor Hugo, and that has so much relevance that even today, all those kind of social events, political events, anywhere in the world is unfolding.
Yeah.
You identify a dynamics, which has been discussed between what happens in a small micro society between two people, so that's one. And of course, Ayn Rand's Fountainhead has stayed,
Yeah, of
that's such a
course.
classic,
Yeah.
and really opens. So yeah, there are, I think, several good books, and you mentioned, and you are very current, I would say, more than me. I haven't read books recently as much, and I'm sure quite a few classics are coming up, but there are several classics, I would say, which I actually, on a serious thinking, yes, it does contribute in our entrepreneurial thinking. So much of the art and the science, everything goes into it. So yeah. Okay. There are quite a few questions coming up. Kshitij, you have asked your question, right? Ishika, you had another question, Ishika?
Yes, so I have two questions. My first question is about companies like Big Basket, who are the new kids in the playground. My question is that these gorillas will keep growing, and time and again you will try to fend them off. But what is the future for these companies like Big Basket? Where are they eventually heading towards? And what kind of sustainable barriers can they build? Because a lot of these companies have in the past have also gone into acquisitions by these bigger giants. So and also with companies like GeoMart, which are coming up and disrupting the ecosystem. So how can we then maintain a healthy ecosystem, startup ecosystem within the country?
So you answer the question yourself, which is that many startups, once they build a valuable asset, an amazing customer-centric company, then they are potential acquisition targets by the gorillas. So maybe Big Basket can be acquired by somebody. Amazon has talked to us multiple times. That has not happened. Somebody else may talk to us. It may happen. It may happen soon. It may take time. We don't know. But acquisition is certainly a possibility. But it's also possible that companies can list and become public. For example, Infosys, right? Listed and became public. No big MNC could acquire them. IBM could not, Accenture could not. Today, TCS is bigger than IBM. So no MNC could acquire them. TCS became itself an MNC bigger than any single IT technology player, services player in the world. So many outcomes are possible. So I think in some ways you answered that yourself.
Okay,
and
thank you.
Actually, it's a good thing for the ecosystem, because then investors find exits. And that's the reason why entrepreneurs actually start companies, sometimes to run it for life and sometimes to sell and find exit.
And Hari, you mentioned about Ishika that she answered her question. So I see that in Ishika and likes other students like her, who I feel, and this was one question from one of the speakers earlier, that does an entrepreneur need to go to an MBA school, right? You have gone through it, through IIM, and I have gone through my share of management education. What do you think about this question?
I don't think management education is essential at all for entrepreneurship. I think that's not essential at all. But I think management education is something you learn along the way, even if you don't do management education. So for example, let's say if you are an arts graduate, if you studied psychology, if you studied engineering, and then take up a corporate job, you anyway begin to learn management. You learn how to manage people, you learn finances, you learn strategy, you learn operations. But this 2-year program, I would say, is a compressed, or 1-year program, very compressed, where they teach you everything in one shot. So I would say it's advantages, but I would say that that is not a guarantee at all to make you a successful entrepreneur.
And do you think from the networking perspective, is it good to go to an MBA school?
Frankly, I don't have a view on this. People say that, you can get to network with individuals, but I am not so sure. I'm not so sure whether it's helpful.
Too
You know,
broad.
a Dune school may have helped some people network and get the biggies, but I don't know whether that networking is helpful or not.
Right. Because at MBA level, you do not develop that level of kind of trust that you develop at school level.
Yeah,
When you cohabit and do that. Yes, and that's what helps. For example, if you have to raise some early stage financing, a friend from school would, like it happened in case of my startup, never asked a second question, and never asked a question until now, even though my venture partially failed, right? Yeah.
Sir, I have another question, if I may ask.
Ishika?
Sure, Ishika, go ahead.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
So I think up until now, the idea of a startup and the idea of entrepreneurship has been very novel. But as we're doing courses, and we as 20-year-olds are learning about entrepreneurship and also seeing it out there in the in the corporate world. Is that what the corporate world is moving towards, as in from the bureaucratic or the strategic business mindset to an entrepreneurial mindset? Is that the future, or is
What's the
this like an
difference between
overestimation?
strategic mindset and entrepreneurial mindset?
So a strategic mindset, I would say, is, I think, more constricting. It is more driven by rules and regulations, and in an entrepreneurial mindset there is more ownership, more creativity given within the organization. So you're kind of you have like an entrepreneurial experience, but within certain certain fence lines. So I just want to know whether this is the future, because that is what my understanding of the world has become.
Got it.
Maybe because of courses like like this one.
Yes. So here's the way I look at it. So I think some of these words, you should not attach too much meaning to it. That's why I asked you this question: what is the difference between strategic and entrepreneurial? Many leaders, in the past who ran some big companies, who helped these companies rediscover themselves and did some amazing product launches and stayed relevant by being customer centric. Do you call them strategic thinkers or entrepreneurial? In my opinion, many of them were entrepreneurial. They actually understood the customer well. They helped executions. For example, when Lou Gerstner was brought in as the CEO of IBM, IBM was a moribund company. It was dying. It was considered a bureaucracy, an elephant that could never dance, that could never cope with a rapidly changing world. But when someone like a Lou Gerstner came from Amex, he changed that company dramatically. He wrote a book also, Elephants Can Also Dance. So was Lou Gerstner being strategic, entrepreneurial? Forget these words. These words don't matter. All that he did was he transformed IBM in many ways. He helped IBM rediscover what it stood for, helped it become more agile, helped it change its way of thinking from the past. So that is what is essential. So I think that is always what is going to make a business succeed. Don't get stuck in these words. And I would say now that because startups, in India have suddenly taken off. In the US, they're already taken off. If you just go back to, in my book, we've talked about one chapter called US, China, India. If you go back to the US history, post World War, even if you go back even before World War I, you can trace the set of companies. For example, you had car companies. Then you had companies like IBM. When IBM peaked off and became a bit bureaucratic, then you had Oracle and such other companies. When Oracle and other companies began to fade and no longer were able to do cutting edge work, then you had Amazon, you had Apple, you had so many other companies coming in. So the innovation cycle continued. So US was always known for being able to continuously innovate, which is relatively new to India. So in India, I think entrepreneurship for the first time has taken root and taken root properly, which is that everyone is realizing that you need to be entrepreneurial. Even big companies are realizing that. And big companies are also realizing that in some ways they can never move as fast as the smaller startups. And therefore, what they are doing, and some they've realized that they can't innovate as much as startups. So what they are doing is they're creating accelerators within their own company and incubating young people to create these ideas and startups. For example, Shell, you must have heard of Shell, right? Shell is a oil company. In Bangalore, in their technology center, they have created a cohort of 10 startups which are focusing on energy so that they get the next big ideas from there. Some banks in India are incubating fintech startups because banks are finding it difficult to innovate because they become big. So by incubation, they are trying to create. Some are acquiring other startups. So I think the startup thing has now become mainstream in India, and startups, have disrupted even big companies, and big companies also need to remain agile.
Right. So it's an organic wave of change.
Yeah.
And if I could add, I entirely see your point, Hari, and I agree. So in a sense, a good strategy is entrepreneurial, or you can say, right? That's a good strategy. Except
Correct.
I can see also your example of Lou Gessner, and how he really turned around Amex. And you look at the ideas that he came up with, and he identified. In fact, your first point of mega trend, he identified some global trends, and how the two spaces will merge. And eventually he identified an opportunity space, and all his products were positioned there, right? And Amex took off. So he was entrepreneurial, in a large company, and so I can totally see your point that we shouldn't be stuck in the jargon, but also there is a dichotomy actually in strategic world. If you look at, for example, Michael Porter School and Mintzberg School, these are two major schools. They did have a long-standing debate, because Michael Porter School was more designed, so the strategy was more frozen there. He was a believer that you should make strategy, you should take strong trade-offs and not change it for quite some time.
Right.
Whereas Mintzberg School is more entrepreneurial, because you have an openness towards some emerging aspects of strategy. So I think maybe other than that, you're right. We are more rooted in India. We have started as entrepreneurs. So that's the advantage India has.
So can I go next and ask my question?
Yes,
That's
please.
fine.
Absolutely.
Hi, sir. So this is Kshitij here. Actually, I wanted to ask one question which I wrote above as well. I think I just wanted, from my previous experiences, and after seeing my dad try a startup, I've seen a lot of people prioritizing certain attributes of investors and certain attributes of VC firms when they go ahead and find those investors. So as a student, do you think it is better to go ahead and find someone who is more reputable in the market, maybe like Tiger or maybe like SoftBank, etc., or is it better to go ahead and find someone or connect with someone who might be a mentor to you and help you, help your startup down the line as well? Is it just about the money, or is it more about the support?
You should not be thinking of Tiger and SoftBank at this stage.
Yeah,
Tiger and SoftBank comes in only if you need, maybe $500 million is the ticket size. When you decide to raise 10,000 crores, you should go to SoftBank. And I think as a student, you should be thinking of raising a few lakhs, which is about friends and family. So I think the first
comparison for me was just between established brands and someone who might not be very established, but wants to go ahead and put their skin in the game.
Very difficult to say that, mostly you may not have a choice. So this may be a question for which there is no answer required. Try it out. You will soon figure out that established brands may not even want to fund somebody they don't know. So it's always important to get early money from people who trust you, people who know you, people who love you, who like you. They will back your idea irrespective of whether it's great or not. They will encourage you. And if your idea happens to take off after that, there will be a bandwagon of people who will want to be who share in your spoils of war or victory. But initially, it will only be those who love you, who will be with you.
Okay, I understand. On a completely separate note, just a follow-up of what Professor Harsh asked you, what according to you is the utility of an MBA if it is not networking and exposure for entrepreneurship?
But I think the best purpose of main purpose of an MBA is that in a compressed time frame, it teaches you a lot of things, which will take a long time to learn on the job. So for example, I feel if there's a 1-year MBA, for example, let's assume there's a 1-year MBA where you are taught basics of management accounting, basics of marketing, basics of, people. If you're all these basics of strategy, all these topics are taught to you in a 1-year period. That's very powerful because in life later on, as part of your work, you may not be exposed. You might be working in operations. You might have no exposure in marketing. You might have no exposure to strategy. So it might take you time to learn some of those. But having said that, just because you know a little bit of marketing, just because you know a little bit of these things, will it give you a big leg up edge in life? I'm not sure. But having said that, there are companies which come with different beliefs. Some companies go to business schools and recruit MBAs. So you will stand to benefit because that company believes that MBAs are helpful. So just as you're asking me, right, I have a subjective point of view and different people have different subjective points of view. And HUL still goes to the top management schools in India to recruit for the marketing function. Many companies go to the top management schools to recruit for specific functions because they realize that more than what is taught in these schools, it is the entrance exam that these people pass, which has essentially made them smart. So they don't have to conduct any test to figure out you're smart, that you can solve problems well. So they're not picking you for necessarily for your MBA, they're picking you for the entrance test that you passed and the fact that you are very smart and that you're a good problem solver, that you're a good quick learner. So there can be many reasons why companies can come to B schools. And I think because companies choose to come to B schools, it's an advantage to do it.
And that's why the combination of IIT and MBA with two cutthroat competition, that's a potent combination, you think?
Yeah. Yes.
Hello. Sir, I have again an annoying off follow-up question. So I just downloaded the mom test and says 134 pages. And let's say after reading this, we realize we have asked the right question in our surveys and we are willing to make a prototype to test this idea. And sir, what should be, like, I know this subjective question is hard to answer, but like, what's in your take? I can see your insights are really sharp. So if you can like suggest some another book, or if you can tell us the take, what should be the minimum feature of that prototype to get valuable or real feedbacks from the customers to like as to think should we iterate or to stop working on that?
There is something called MVP. You heard of MVP, right?
Yes, we did it yesterday only.
Yeah, sir, minimum product. Yeah. I know.
Minimum?
Minimum viable product, sir. Exactly. I don't remember.
So correct. It's a minimum viable product. So what is a minimum viable product is something that you can figure out. You have been taught. In fact, you will understand an MVP better than me. But you need an MVP to be able to figure out, whether a product is attractive for its users or not.
Exactly.
It should be it should be sufficient for you to figure out. That means it should be reasonably indicative of the end product. It may not have many features, fine features, but it should be reasonably reflective and indicative of how the product will look like. So you can rapidly build out an MVP, and that MVP will help you figure out whether it is viable or not. Whether customers love it or not, customers will pay for it or not. Many customers will tell you, I love your product. But the moment you say pay for it, they will say to hell with it, I'm not interested. So just because somebody likes your product does not mean that they're willing to pay for it. So ultimately, it's really about whether they're willing to pay for what they like. That is what really matters. And that's the test of the pudding. Many businesses built on feedback that they like your product have failed because the moment the customers have to pay for it, they don't want it. They want a lot of products which are anyway available free. Today, for example, a lot of education available is free. You can learn so many things on the net. So many companies are there. So much material is available. So many people may not even pay for some kinds of, therefore edtech companies have to very carefully evaluate what is my value prop. Why will people pay for my product when so much is available for free? That's the question.
Yeah, sure. I will keep this in mind. I will not going to provide anything for free. Just last thing, if there's any book you can recommend, that's great. Otherwise, thank you so much for your answer.
Okay.
So can I ask a question? Akshat this side.
Yes.
Yes, Akshat.
Yeah. So on that MBA school note, I mean, I've heard a lot of people saying that I'll better work in a startup for a few for some time and then I'll do my own thing. So I mean, what do you think about that? Is working with a startup for a short duration of time, learning how things operate and exploring that particular industry is better to start your own thing, or will it be better to actually go in a MBA school and learn get formal education?
See, these are questions for which you should find your own answers. I can give you some inputs, but as I said, no intellect, I told you the difference between character. Character is in being able to take some of these decisions on your own. So for example, startup, right? You have to ask me a question about startup. Will people learn? Of course, people will learn by working for a startup. The learning will be very intense, very fast paced in an accelerated time frame. What you can learn in 1 year in a startup, if you're at the right startup, is possibly what you can learn in 3 years in a bigger company. So undoubtedly you can learn in startups. But by working in a startup, you may not get that MBA stamp, you may not get that brand. Amazon may not come and hire you from campus because you're not in a campus. So that negative is there. So I think you need to figure out what you want to do in life, whether you want to learn or you want a stamp or you want a brand. What do you want? So I think there's nothing right and wrong or good or bad on this.
If I can quickly add one thing. So who Akshat wanted to ask that question, right?
Yes, sir.
Yes, Akshat. So I'm going to post some session recordings. This is from Pan IIT, and especially one session which we had with Jyoti Bansal. You know, I'm sure many of you would know. IIT Delhi graduate and never went into any master's program. He went to work straight into a startup and built it, and eventually he had one of the biggest exit with Cisco. You know, almost $4 billion, right? So he was speaking about his reasons, right? So I will post that, and maybe you'll get some answer. You know, because sometimes we say whether we should go to an MBA, whether we should go and work in a startup. But we don't get a real first-hand kind of explanation of why somebody went into one or the other, you know. So I thought his account was fairly compelling. So we're going to share that. And I know that you guys had to do some assignments. So finally, they have released the session recordings, and I'm going to share that with you.
So I have a question for you. So apart from the business aspects, I believe emotional intelligence also plays a very important role in one's entrepreneurial journey. So like, what are your favorite books, like whether fiction or non-fiction, that helps one develops emotional intelligence?
Yes, emotional intelligence is not important just for an entrepreneur. Emotional intelligence is important to navigate life in general, to be as successful as a family member, to have a happy family, to be part of a company and be effective, even if you're not an entrepreneur, just an employee. I think emotional intelligence is a very critical component. I have not read any particular book on emotional intelligence. My learning has been the hard way, by experience, by making mistakes. But I think if you look up on the net, you will find emotional intelligence books. If I'm not mistaken, the word emotional intelligence was coined by some guy, I forget, Goldman something, no? His name was, just check that, it was coined. And he has also written a book with the same name, I think, Emotional Intelligence. It's considered a classic. Just let me check this out. You can check this out. It's emotional intelligence. Who's coined the term? I think it was some Goldman guy. So you can figure that out. Daniel Goleman, G-O-L-E, Goleman, correct. So that, I think, book is considered a masterpiece. If you're really serious about reading it, you should pick up that book by Daniel Goleman.
Right. Thank you, sir.
Excellent. We have any other question? You can either unmute and ask. There's one question I can see from Raghav Modi. He asks about, do India has ecosystem where startups could scale up to the level that they become big businesses of tomorrow at the scale of Apple and Microsoft? And does acquisition by a big company leave space for further innovation?
So very difficult to say whether a company in India will become as big as a Microsoft or a Google or an Apple. It is like asking a question whether India will become the US after 10 years, 20 years. Will it become having the same per capita income, same prosperity levels? Very difficult to answer that question. My own sense is that it's very difficult. It's not very easy, because US is such an amazing country that they have been able to bring everything together. And it's a combination of deep design, combination of accident, combination of choice, combination of culture, which have resulted in that very liberal culture. They brought the best talent from across the world. Best German scientists migrated to America, including people like Albert Einstein. The German scientists who created the rockets that landed on London in World War II were almost the same rockets that NASA used, Saturn, to send man to the moon and man into space. So getting all those things together, liberal culture, welcoming the best talent in the world, science, technology, entrepreneurship, Edison, all those things is not easy. So my own sense is that, if you ask, can India be a US in the near future? It's very difficult. Similarly, can Indian startup become a Google? Not very easy, but you may have, but not very easy, all I could say.
Right. And of course, some of those values, ethos have come to be challenged, right? So US is facing its own challenges right now, except some scope for recovery with the new elections. So yeah, I think, but India could grow into its own brand. For example, China is not really US-like, but it has given a certain competition to China, right? So could India, right? In some ways.
Excuse me, sir.
What do you think, Hari, on this? Do you think India could grow in its own unique?
Yes, so India is unique. In the
system?
chapter on US, China, India, we've said each is unique. Each have taken different paths to success. None of the three are identical, and very difficult to predict what the future holds.
So we don't have to necessarily imitate any other nation.
Correct.
We can grow in our own brand. Yes. Okay, somebody else had questions, please. Yeah,
actually,
somebody was asking a question. Yes, please.
Yes, sir. Sorry, I was interrupting in between. I am Raghav, and I was saying that there was a second part of the question also, that whether an acquisition by a bigger company also leaves the space for further innovation in a startup.
The startup no longer remains a startup once it is acquired by a bigger company. It becomes part of the bigger company. Now it depends upon how the bigger company treats the company that has been acquired, whether it leaves it alone, whether it interferes, whether it imposes its own bureaucracy, whether it allows that entity to continue to innovate, gives it the freedom. That is a difficult thing, because ultimately it depends on the attitude of the startup. So for example, when IBM acquired Daksh, of which I was a part, there was 2 years complete independence for Daksh to run and build. But after some time, the IBM bureaucracy began creeping in, and very quickly we realized that it's going to stall. But IBM acquired an asset, and they used that to build one line of business very effectively.
Right. Thank you, sir, for answering.
Hello, sir. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yes.
Sir, 2 or 3 questions back, someone asked about some big investors or small investors, whether you propose to big investors or something like that. So, as an IT Delhi student, how would you recommend us a method as to me, so I can approach the investors? So, where will I start approaching the investor if I have a company and a prototype?
Do you have a company? Do you have a company?
Not a registered one, but I have a prototype and a working.
Why do you need the funds? Why do you need investment?
To expand it to the level so that we can launch.
What do you mean
properly.
by expand? Do you already have paying customers?
No, sir. That is.
So don't look for funds till you get paying customers. You spend your own money from your pocket, get some money from your friends and family, get some paying customers, show proof to yourself that your product is worth paying for and there is some traction. Once you see some traction, think of raising money. Until then, don't think of raising money. Focus on building your product and getting some money from your close friends and family.
Yes, sir. That's what I'm asking. To launch the product, if I need a certain amount of capital, which I cannot achieve as an IT Delhi student, because launching a product to the proper audience is a very big challenge for a lot of startups. A lot of people in India do not even heard of many important apps that are available in Google Play or something like that. So to launch my product completely properly in the Indian market, I need to approach most of the audience for it, and for that I need some kind of backup or mentoring or some kind of funds to
so there are several accelerators that call for potential entrepreneurs to make pitches, and there are so many of them. You should try and find yourself making a pitch to any of them. If some of them like your idea, they feel impressed with your idea, they will invest in your idea. They will take a 20% stake and maybe give you 80 lakhs possible based on how you think.
Yeah.
But when you go to them to make a pitch, you have to show that there is already some traction. You guys can't go take a piece of paper and say, I have a great idea to build an app. Will you fund me? They will not do that. So you should get some paying customers at least, some customer excitement. If not paying customers, you should at least show, a growth in the customer base, people using the product. You should use some metrics that will excite people to invest in you. And there are so many places which ask for pitches, so many places that conduct pitches, India Accelerator, so many people, reach out to potential entrepreneurs to make pitches. Find yourself in front of them.
That's a very appropriate guidance, I must say, Hari, to Mayank. Mayank, I would also recommend you to focus on, because we had 2 sessions, one by, Sashi Reddy and the other recently by Subedar Khurana. So understanding the concepts of MVP and especially in your product area, if you haven't necessarily presented, you can talk to me about it. But let's say if you have a SaaS product, then he has several clues. What should be your preparedness before you go to an investor, right? So I think Hari really spelled out, some of the aspects, like you should have some paying customers. That's a preparedness aspect, because in India, usually people don't fund on idea, except your, very familiar categories like friends and family.
Yeah.
Okay. Other questions? Anybody else? Because I have a couple of quick questions. And, one thing I would say, because as I was mentioning to my family, that someone who knows Big Basket so well is going to speak today. So we are consumers of both Big Basket and Milk Basket in Gurgaon. Okay. So as from the being consumers, we have, we have a portfolio of products that we need, and we get something from Big Basket, the others from Milk Basket. And we have our own reason as consumers.
Yeah.
And I heard some things you talked about, Big Basket being asset heavy, right? And how investors initially were not ready, but eventually somebody came on board. Big, right? You're funded by I guess Alibaba, right? It's one of the
Alibaba is one of the investors.
One of the investors, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, so what would you in value proposition? What do you see the distinction between these 2 competitors in the same space?
Oh, we're not in the same space at all. So Milk Basket does what I call as daily supplies of grocery, which is a subscription business. So if you can want early at night, if you decide, for example, you want 3 packets of milk the next day, you want some bread, butter, some vegetables, they will do that. So they have a limited assortment because they have to fulfill it the next day morning. So Big Basket also does this. We call it BB Daily, which is the daily business.
Yes.
But Big Basket has other lines of business as well, which is that planned purchases. For example, if you want, we hold almost 40,000 SKUs, which is like we are like a supermarket. And therefore, if you want anything out of those 40,000 SKUs, we will deliver them to you after 4 hours or maybe next day morning. So our assortment, our entire business is, we have multiple lines. Big Basket, Milk Basket is only in one of the lines, which is subscription. So you can subscribe and there's a limited assortment. So for example, our assortment will have gourmet. It has some 5,000 gourmet items, many of which are imported. It has all types of fish, all types of exotic stuff. It has, kitchen items. It has plastic buckets. It has fertilizer for their gardens. We will have all those things. So Milk Basket has not been acquired by JioMart, of course.
So then who do you see as your competitor? Do you have a competitor?
Yeah. At the moment, you can see Amazon, JioMart emerging as competitors.
Okay.
Flipkart emerging as competitors. Walmart, Flipkart.
So you are in different adjacent space, but you're moving to occupy the same space and compete.
Right.
After pandemic, especially. Yeah.
Yeah, correct. So for example, Milk Basket, I told you they do the subscription business or daily business, limited assortment, delivered next day morning, night if you place an order. Or sometimes you don't even have to place an order. You can say that next 30 days, please deliver milk, and they will keep delivering. So Milk Basket has been acquired by JioMart. So we will be competing with JioMart because JioMart is planning to do exactly what Big Basket does. Many other things that we are doing, JioMart will do, Amazon will do, Walmart will do. So we will be competing with them.
Right. And in your mind, because you brought that customer centricity as a point, what do you see as the hallmark customer centricity you have in Big Basket? Because we have had different kind of experience, right? So, but what do you see from your vantage?
So I think delivering consistent experience on scale is difficult. As I told you, Flipkart tried the grocery business. They actually gave it up and they came back after 1 year, still have not taken off. So grocery is a very difficult to execute business. And when I'm saying customer centric, it does not mean that 70 million consumers in India have never had a negative experience. That's not the meaning of customer centricity, because some customers will always have a negative experience because somewhere goof up will have happened. And that's the meaning of execution on scale. But the metric to measure it is what is the customer complaints percentage. So for example, when we track it seriously, we try and ensure that customer complaints are less than 1.5%. So if 100 orders are placed, there is less than 1.5% of complaints. And that's the metric to go by, not whether one customer in India has had a complaint or not. That's not the metric.
Right. I agree. And but I was just looking for some metric of customer. Let's say you have a large customer support team. Because if I had to share with you my recent experience with Zoom, right? Zoom, I subscribe to for more than 500 participants, right? Around 500. So I bought the product, I paid for it, but we had a couple of sessions where not more than 100 people could join, even though I had the subscription for 500. So I tried to reach them. They only have one number that is in US, right? I spoke to the billing department, but I could never reach the technical support, right? And I ended up having 1 or 2 sessions with that limitation, where in one session, another session, students could not
I get
join.
what you're saying.
But I fixed it myself today. After a lot of research, I eventually found that only I had to tick at one place, and that 500 add-on will get given to me, for usage of 500 entry. So that to me reflects that they didn't have sufficient. And
correct. So we don't do this. For example, we don't have an IVR. You know what's an IVR, right? When you call a customer number, it takes you to an interactive voice response where it tells, if you for English speak 1, for this you dial 2, for this you do, if you have a billing problem, this one. So we don't have an IVR at all. So if you call a customer's service number, a person picks up. So that's one unique for us. For example, it never goes to an IVR at all. It's one person picks up, and our response time is in 10 seconds. A service agent should pick up. 10 seconds is our 95% of our calls should be picked up in 10 seconds. Of course, there will be 5% which will be picked up in 15 seconds possibly, but 95% of the calls should be picked up in 10 seconds. When we started the business, we said no questions asked returns policy. If you're unhappy, if you order 1 kg of apples, there are 8 apples, and after 3 days you tell us that 2 apples we were unhappy with, you can return those 2. I mean, you'll be refunded for those 2 apples. We won't ask you should have told us on that first day. No questions asked. So many of these steps we've taken, where, for example, we said that if we were supposed to deliver to you between 5 p.m. to 7 p.m., if we deliver to you at 7:02 p.m., we will do a 10% of the order refund. At some point, we took that stand as well. So we've taken some of these stands.
That's excellent. And I'm sure that costs more to have a person at the other end, right?
Correct.
Than IVR, yes. So that is so wonderful. Well, we could go on. I can see some words of accolades here. Thank you, sir, for answering my question. Sitij says, and Shashank says, I must say one of the best session of MSL. Thanks for answering our questions, sir.
Thank you so much.
All this goes to you, and I'm sure, right? And another one comes. Thank you so much for the session, sir. got some really good insights. Shreya says that. So I'm sure there are very many people, who are quietly getting benefited, got benefited from this session. And I'm sure it's been a fairly intense session for an hour and 45 minutes now. So I will leave it up to you if you have anything in the closing, any concluding remark, and then we can call it a day. Right,
No,
over to you.
nothing concluding. Wish you all the very best. Nice to see you studying entrepreneurship, taking a course. Wish you all the very best and may all your ideas succeed.
Thank you. Thank you. On behalf of all students, all our PhD students who assist us in this program, we have 4 of them, Mansi and Bhupendra and Gaurav and also Apurva, right? So I truly appreciate your coming over, Hari, and we wish that you join us on other relevant sessions, because I'm sure you are a person who's reading so much and thinking so much, and you are an author. So I put authors in a different category, because to be able to put your thoughts in a meaningful, organized manner, it really takes one's own understanding to a different level, and the desire to share it with people, in a public sort of a way. So that's why I think that you would continue to grow in your insights and you have lots to share. I would also recommend strongly your books to students. Guys, you have a chance now or later, anytime, pick up his books and you would remember this session, you would remember this exchange and conversation, and it'll make it come alive, some of the detailed conversation that Mr. Hari has put in his 2 very insightful books. I know we didn't talk about the other book, Jugaad, right? That was whether an innovation or not. That question is a very, very interesting question. So maybe another time soon, we will request you, and if you have the time, we could have you again.
Yeah, great.
Thank you
very much.
Thank
Really
you.
appreciate
Thank you,
it.
Hari.
Thanks.
Take care.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Take care. Good night, guys. So
Good night.
please enjoy your dinner at the comfort of your home, and we will touch base again. Take care. Bye. I'm closing the session now. Thank you.